Words are not just sounds in the air. They are not merely vibrations carried from one mouth to another. They are symbols, containers of meaning, and when spoken by someone we love, they carry a weight that cannot be measured by any ordinary scale. Think about this. A single phrase from a stranger may barely touch you, but the same phrase, spoken by someone you trust, can pierce straight into your soul. That is the nature of words within relationships. They are amplified by intimacy, magnified by trust, and intensified by the vulnerability we offer to one another. When a man speaks to a woman he loves, his words carry more than just his thoughts. They carry his character, his commitment, and his care. And when those words shift from kindness to cruelty, from reassurance to indifference, they can shake the very foundation of her world. Every woman knows this truth in her bones. She doesn't fear words because she is weak. She fears them because she has invested herself in the man who speaks them. When she allows herself to love, she opens her heart to him. She lets her guard down. She places her sense of worth partly in his hands. That is what intimacy demands. It's a mutual surrender. So when he speaks, his words echo not just in her ears, but in her identity. They carry the power to affirm that she is cherished, or the power to suggest she is disposable, and no one can hear such implications without feeling their spirit tremble. You see, it's a grave mistake to underestimate the responsibility of speech. A man may think he is being casual, that his words are just a reflection of frustration, or perhaps just an offhand remark. But to the woman who listens, those words may not fade. They might linger, replaying in her mind late at night, resurfacing in moments of doubt, reshaping how she sees herself. She begins to wonder if she's enough, if she's worthy, if the love she thought was secure is already slipping away. And so, the simple act of speaking carries consequences far greater than most people dare to realize. But here's where the beauty lies. Just as words can wound, they can also heal. A man can strengthen a woman's confidence with genuine encouragement. He can restore her faith in the relationship with words of devotion. He can ease her fears with honesty, spoken not as manipulation, but as truth rooted in care. Words can create the safety in which love flourishes. They can build a sanctuary where both people grow into stronger, braver versions of themselves. That is the real potential of speech creation, not destruction. Yet too often we misuse it. Too often men speak without intention, as though words were disposable, as though the person receiving them were invincible. But women are not invincible, and neither are men. To believe otherwise is to deny our humanity. We are fragile beings in many ways, held together by meaning, and meaning is carried in language. If we distort that language, if we weaponize it, if we use it carelessly, we end up unraveling the very bond that we claim to protect. So, the weight of words in relationships is immense. They are not cheap. They are not forgettable. They are the very threads weaving intimacy together or tearing it apart. Every man must understand that when he speaks to the woman who trusts him, he is shaping her world as much as his own. He is leaving imprints that may last for years, perhaps even for life. And when you recognize the gravity of that truth, you begin to realize something profound. To speak carelessly is to destroy what you love, but to speak with integrity is to nurture it into something unbreakable. Never underestimate the power of your words, because in them lies the destiny of your relationships, and perhaps even the destiny of your life. There are few phrases in the human language more devastating than hearing the words, "I don't love you anymore." Those 5 words carry with them the collapse of everything that came before. They signal not just the fading of affection, but the dismantling of trust, commitment, and the sense of belonging that was carefully built, sometimes over years. For a woman, hearing them from the man she gave her heart to can feel like a death of sorts, a death of the dream she invested in, a death of the story she believed she was living. What makes these words so crushing is not simply that love has disappeared, but that she is left questioning whether it was ever real to begin with. The ground shifts beneath her. Did the moments of laughter mean nothing? Did the promises of forever already contain an expiration date? When a man utters those words, he is not just ending a chapter, he is calling into question the entire book. And that is why the impact is so profound. A woman does not just lose the love she thought she had, she loses the meaning she built around that love. There is an illusion many people cling to, the idea that love is permanent, fixed, and unshakable once it has been spoken. But the reality is harsher. Love is alive. It breathes, it demands care, it can grow, and it can wither. When a man declares he no longer loves, what he is really saying is that the connection has been starved, neglected, or abandoned. For the woman, this statement is not just a withdrawal of affection, it is an indictment, intentional or not, that she was no longer worth loving. And such a message cuts to the very core of identity. Now, some men justify those words by saying they are simply telling the truth. And honesty is important, of course, but too often those words are spoken hastily in moments of frustration, as though love were a switch that can be turned off with a declaration. In truth, what is being expressed is often something deeper: exhaustion, resentment, fear, or even the inability to confront one's own failures. "I don't love you anymore" might sound like clarity, but many times it is a mask for confusion, and when spoken, it leaves devastation in its wake. The tragedy is that love rarely just vanishes overnight. It erodes slowly, weakened by silence, by neglect, by the absence of small gestures that once held everything together. To the woman who hears those words, it feels sudden and catastrophic, but in reality, the signs may have been there all along. She may have felt the distance creeping in, but she held on to hope. And that hope is what makes the moment of hearing them so excruciating. It is the shattering of the belief that love could be saved. But as crushing as those words are, there is also a hidden possibility within them. Because once love has been withdrawn, a woman is faced with a choice. She can allow those words to define her worth, or she can rise from them with a deeper strength. Pain, as unbearable as it feels, is also a clarifier. It strips away illusions. It forces you to confront the truth, and it can teach you that your value was never dependent on another's ability to love you. When a man says, "I don't love you anymore," he believes he is closing a door. But for the woman who survives it, those words can mark the beginning of something else. The realization that she is strong enough to endure the loss, wise enough to see through the pain, and brave enough to rebuild a life that no longer relies on another's validation. It may be the ultimate blow, but it can also be the spark that ignites her transformation. Because sometimes the very words meant to break you are the ones that awaken the strength you never knew you had. Few wounds cut as deeply as the suggestion, spoken or implied, that you are not enough, when those words, or even their shadow, come from the man a woman loves. They do more than bruise the heart. They strike at the foundation of identity. To be told, "You're not enough," whether directly or through subtle comparison, is to be told that your love, your effort, your very being has fallen short of what was hoped for. And that is devastating, because love, by its nature, requires vulnerability. You cannot give yourself to someone without, at the same time, placing your worth at risk in their eyes. The sting of comparison is particularly corrosive. When a man measures the woman he is with against someone else, another woman, a fantasy, or even an idealized version of who she once was, it doesn't just diminish her in that moment, it creates a fracture in her sense of self. She begins to wonder if she will ever measure up, if she is replaceable, if she was only loved conditionally all along. And this is the danger of such words. They plant seeds of doubt that grow like weeds in the mind, suffocating the confidence and joy that once made the relationship vibrant. It is easy to underestimate how powerful comparison can be. A man might think he is simply voicing frustration or making an observation. But for the woman who hears it, it is not just commentary. It is condemnation. It is the unspoken suggestion that no matter what she does, it will never be enough to satisfy him. And when that thought takes root, it does more than damage the relationship. It begins to damage her relationship with herself. She starts to carry the question into every part of her life, am I enough? And when that question becomes constant, it eats away at her strength. Yet here is something important to remember. The problem is rarely that she is not enough. More often, the problem lies in the unrealistic expectations placed upon her. Sometimes a man projects his own dissatisfaction, his own failures, onto the woman beside him. Instead of facing his own inadequacy, he casts the blame outward. He convinces himself that if only she were different more this, less that his life would feel complete. But such reasoning is a trap, because no human being can ever fulfill the endless void of another person's unresolved struggles. To demand that is not love, it is a distortion of love. For the woman, the challenge becomes not to internalize those words, not to let them dictate her sense of worth. Because worth is not determined by comparison. It is not measured by how you stand against someone else. It is intrinsic, undeniable, rooted in the simple fact of your humanity. To forget this is to give away power that should never have been surrendered. When someone tells you that you are not enough, what they are truly revealing is their inability to see you clearly. They are exposing their blindness, not your deficiency, and yet the pain is real. To be compared, to be diminished, to be told you fall short. These are experiences that leave scars. But scars are not just reminders of pain. They are also proof of survival. They show that you endured something meant to break you, and you carried on. And in that endurance lies a kind of beauty, a strength that no shallow comparison can erase. So while you're not enough may feel like a judgment, it does not have to be the final word. It can become instead a test, a moment where you reclaim your own narrative. You may not be enough for someone who cannot see you, but that does not mean you are not enough in truth. The sting of comparison may burn, but it can also awaken in you the realization that your worth has never depended on anyone else's vision. And when you grasp that, you become untouchable, because no voice of judgment can undo what you already know to be true. The words meant to diminish you can, in the end, reveal your immeasurable strength, and that is more than enough. I need space. On the surface, those words sound harmless, almost reasonable. After all, every human being requires room to breathe, moments of solitude, the ability to step back and gather themselves. But when spoken within the fragile context of a relationship, especially from a man to a woman who has entrusted him with her heart, they can carry a very different meaning. They often echo not as a request for balance, but as a warning sign of distance. What she hears is not simply a call for quiet or reflection. What she hears is the terrifying possibility of abandonment. This is because relationships are built on closeness, on the promise of togetherness. When a woman commits to a man, she invests not only in shared experiences, but in the belief that she will not be left alone to navigate life's storms. So when the words "I need space" are uttered, they can sound like the first step in unraveling that promise. It is as though a door has been cracked open, suggesting that what was once secure may no longer be. For many women, this phrase sparks a spiral of questions. Is he falling out of love? Is he searching for someone else? Am I not enough to hold his attention anymore? The human mind fills silence with fear, and fear has a way of magnifying even the smallest hint of distance. She feels the bond loosening, and what frightens her most is not just the space he is asking for, but the uncertainty of what he intends to do with it. Will he return, or will this space become the chasm that swallows the relationship whole? The irony is that sometimes a man who says he needs space is not seeking escape, but clarity. He may be overwhelmed by responsibilities, pulled apart by pressures he cannot articulate, or wrestling with inner battles that have nothing to do with her at all. But the tragedy lies in how those words are received, because when he fails to explain, when he chooses ambiguity over honesty, she is left alone with her worst interpretations. And often those interpretations are far more frightening than the reality. Still, the request for space is not inherently wrong. There is wisdom in recognizing the need for breathing room, for time to reflect, for space to grow individually. But it must be framed with care, with reassurance, with the clear message that distance does not mean detachment. Without that, it becomes a dagger cloaked in politeness. It stirs in her the deepest fear of all, that love is being withdrawn slowly, quietly, without explanation, until she is left holding on to nothing but memories. What matters then is not only the space itself, but how it is communicated. A man who loves deeply must understand that words like these are not neutral. They land with weight, they shape perception, they awaken fears that may have been buried but never gone. If he truly values her, he cannot simply toss them out and walk away. He must offer the reassurance that space is not absence, that solitude is not rejection, and that distance does not mean the end. For the woman who hears those words, the challenge is to resist being consumed by the fear of abandonment. Because while she cannot control what he truly means, she can control how she responds. She can recognize that her worth does not diminish because someone else steps back. She can understand that fear often exaggerates what is unknown, and that strength lies in refusing to surrender her identity to someone else's uncertainty. I need space may feel like a precursor to loss, but it does not have to define the story. Sometimes it is simply a call for recalibration. And if it does become the beginning of the end, then it is also the beginning of a truth that makes room for something new. Because abandonment is terrifying, but far more terrifying is the thought of living chained to someone else's hesitation. The request for space may wound, but it can also be the moment that awakens the courage to stand tall, to see fear for what it is, and to refuse to let it dictate the value of your life. It's over. Just 2 words, simple in form but heavy with consequence. When a man says them to a woman who has poured her heart into him, they strike with the force of an ending that feels absolute. Unlike the subtle distance of "I need space," or the confusing sting of "you're not enough," these words carry no ambiguity. They are final, they are blunt, and they declare that what was once alive has been brought to a close. For the woman who hears them, it is not just the death of a relationship. It is the death of an entire vision of the future. Think about what is invested in love. It's not just moments shared in the present, but years of hopes, sacrifices, and dreams projected forward. She imagines building a life together, raising a family, growing old side by side. Every conversation, every compromise, every gesture of care was part of that unfolding story. So when the words "it's over" arrive, they do not only cut off the present, they unravel the future. They rip apart the narrative that gave her days meaning, leaving her staring at an empty horizon where once she saw possibility. What makes this so devastating is not only the loss of the relationship, but the shattering of identity that often follows. A woman in love does not merely exist beside her partner. She intertwines her sense of self with him. She becomes part of a we, and that we reshapes her very idea of who she is. When that bond is severed, she is forced to confront not only life without him, but life without the self she had come to know within that relationship. It is not just him she loses, but the version of herself that existed in his presence. Men sometimes underestimate this reality. They imagine ending a relationship is simply walking away from a commitment that no longer feels right. But for the woman on the receiving end, it feels like the collapse of a foundation she believed to be solid. She is left sifting through fragments, replaying moments, searching for signs she might have missed. Was there something she could have done differently? Was she blind to the truth? And these questions haunt her because the abrupt finality of "it's over" offers no room for resolution, no chance to fight for what was lost. Yet within this harsh finality lies a paradox. The ending she dreads also carries within it the possibility of liberation, because while those words close one chapter, they also make undeniable what may have been eroding for a long time. They force clarity where there was confusion, and clarity, however painful, is the soil from which renewal can grow. As crushing as it is to hear "it's over," it is also the moment when illusions are stripped away. It reveals the truth she must face, and truth, no matter how bitter, is always stronger than lies. For the woman, the journey forward is not easy. She must learn to live again, to rebuild the story of her life without him at its center. She must find meaning not in what has been lost, but in what remains and what can still be created. And though grief will follow her like a shadow, there will come a day when she realizes that the end she feared did not destroy her. It remade her, because sometimes the endings we dread most are the very ones that free us. They strip us bare, they break us open, and they force us to discover strength we never knew was there. And when the dust settles, she will look back and see that the words that once felt like a death sentence were, in truth, the beginning of her rebirth. "It's over" may sound like the end of love, but in the silence that follows, it can also become the beginning of life. Fear is inevitable in love. To open yourself up to another human being is to invite the possibility of rejection, disappointment, and heartbreak. Every woman knows this, even if she doesn't always speak it aloud. The fear of hearing those words, "I don't love you anymore. You're not enough. I need space." "It's over" is not just the fear of losing a man. It is the fear of losing the sense of worth, safety, and identity that has been bound up in him. But fear, as paralyzing as it feels, is not the end of the story. Fear can be transformed. It can become fuel. It can become wisdom. And it can become the very force that strengthens the woman who once trembled under its weight. What we often forget is that fear reveals where we are most vulnerable, and where we are most vulnerable is often where we need to grow. When a woman is devastated by words spoken carelessly or cruelly, she may at first believe she has been destroyed. But as time passes, as she sits in the quiet aftermath, she begins to realize that the pain has exposed something vital, the parts of herself that were dependent on external validation. The fear of abandonment, of comparison, of finality, these are rooted in the belief that her worth is something fragile, something placed in the hands of another. But once she recognizes this, fear shifts. It becomes not a cage, but a teacher. Strength is not built in comfort. It is forged in the very moments when you believe you cannot endure, and yet you do. Every woman who has heard words that cut her to the core knows this truth. She knows the nights of lying awake, wondering if she will ever feel whole again. She knows the days when she moves through the world as if on autopilot, carrying a heaviness no one else can see. And yet, she also knows the quiet, almost imperceptible moment when the weight begins to lift, when she discovers that she is still here, still breathing, still capable of love and life. That is what turning fear into strength looks like. It is not loud or dramatic, it is steady, unyielding, and profoundly human. To turn fear into strength is also to reclaim power over meaning. Words may wound, but they do not have to define. When a man says, "You're not enough," the fear is that it is true, but strength comes in realizing that his words were never the final authority. When he says it's over, the fear is that life itself has ended, but strength emerges when she sees that life continues, that endings are also beginnings. Fear always whispers that you are powerless. Strength answers by proving that you are not. This transformation does not mean becoming hardened or closed off. Quite the opposite. It means learning to carry both pain and resilience together, to allow scars to become part of your story without letting them consume it. It means recognizing that love will always involve risk, and that risk will always involve fear, but fear is not the enemy. Fear is the signal that you are alive, that what you value matters, and that you have something to lose. And when you face it, when you refuse to let it dictate your choices, it becomes the very soil in which strength grows. So the words women fear most may come, and they may leave wounds that linger, but within those wounds lies the possibility of transformation. What was once terror becomes resolve. What was once fragility becomes power, and what was once the voice of despair becomes the steady heartbeat of resilience. Because fear is not the end, it is the beginning of strength and the proof that you were always stronger than the words that tried to break you. When we step back and look at it all, the message becomes clear. Words carry a power far greater than most of us realize. They can soothe or scar, bind people closer or drive them apart forever. For women, the words spoken by a man they love carry a weight that shapes not only the relationship, but often their very sense of self. To hear phrases like "I don't love you anymore," "You're not enough," "I need space," or "It's over," is to confront fears that run to the deepest levels of human vulnerability, the fear of rejection, of abandonment, of being unworthy of love. But the story does not end with fear. Pain can be transformed. Words that once broke the heart can become the very catalyst for growth, for self-discovery, for resilience. The truth is, no one's worth is defined by the love they receive or lose. Strength emerges when fear is faced, when wounds are acknowledged, and when the decision is made to rise again. So let this be the reminder. Love will always involve risk, but risk is not weakness. It is the doorway to meaning. And when the words you feared most are spoken, you may bend, you may grieve, but you will not break. Because within you lies the strength to transform every ending into a beginning, and every fear into a foundation for becoming someone stronger, wiser, and unshakably whole.